Hello and welcome to Ancestry DNA 101. My name is Lisa Elzy and I am here to be your guide to help you discover new things and new information and finding the most out of your Ancestry DNA test. So why don't we dive in? Let's see what we can find. First, you might ask yourself, why Ancestry DNA? I can give you 3 incredible reasons why. First, Ancestry has the largest consumer DNA network in the world with more than 18 million people. Next, Ancestry has millions of family trees linked to Ancestry DNA test results. And finally, you own your DNA data. Privacy is very important to Ancestry and puts you in control of how much information you want to share. First things first, you'll need to purchase an Ancestry DNA test. You can purchase them online on Ancestry.com or through Amazon even. And the test is a user-friendly saliva-based test that you activate online. You then send your sample to our lab via the mail with an enclosed prepaid mailbox. And once the lab has received your sample, your test results should arrive digitally to your Ancestry.com account within about typically 6 to 8 weeks. So while you wait for your results, you can start building your own family tree online on Ancestry for free, entering information that you already know, or photos or stories. And then you can also begin a 2-week free trial of Ancestry to then go through our billions of records online and attach some of those records from our collection to your ancestors in your family tree, finding out more information then about your family story. So make sure you link that family tree that you make while you wait for your results to your Ancestry DNA results. How do you do this? Let's walk through that process. So this will be your Ancestry DNA homepage, and up at the top you'll see where it says settings. So you can reach this homepage by entering the URL AncestryDNA.com. Once you've taken your test, this kind of page will come up. It won't show you results yet, so if they're not there, just go ahead and go to that settings page, and then it will include a drop-down menu, and we're going to click on that on the top right. This will take you to your DNA settings, and then under tree link, where you can see where you scroll down, it has link to tree. This will show you if you have linked your tree or if it's not linked to any tree in your account. If you have, it will list what tree it is linked to. If not, such as this case, this example, you can click change. You then choose a tree from the drop-down menu. So if you've already created only one tree, there'll be one tree to choose from, and you can connect it to that tree. Your results can only be linked to one tree. So linking your tree then enriches that DNA experience by possibly seeing how you are related to your DNA matches, which we'll discuss in a moment, and will help you discover other places or regions where your family lived and migration paths. So remember though, privacy is paramount to Ancestry. So all information about living people in your family tree is protected. So to further your understanding a little bit of how these DNA results work and vary from siblings that may both have taken an Ancestry DNA test, let's look at an example of how DNA inheritance works. You probably already know that you inherit half of your DNA from your father and half from your mother, but your DNA carries so much information that there can be a lot of variation on what gets passed on. So why don't we look at it in a little bit of a different way? Maybe that will help you understand. So imagine someone whose DNA name, quote unquote, right, is Andrew, okay? But when he and his wife, Sandra, have children, he can only pass on half of that name, right? So if we're talking about DNA is like a name, he can only pass on half of that name to each child, because 50%. And in one son's case, we'll say that he passes on the D and the E and the W from his name. And then his wife, Sandra, passes on the letters A, D, and R. And those 6 letters then combine to give their son the genetic name, quote, quote, of Edward. So meanwhile, another couple, Graham and Elaine, have a daughter named Angela. She inherited the G and the 2 A's in her name from her father, and the E, the L, and the N from her mother. You still with me? Good. Let's take it a step further. Let's say a few years down the line, Edward and Angela get married. Then they have kids of their own. Their DNA mixes to produce 3 children, Gerald, Reagan, and Glenda. What's interesting, though, is that even though all 3 of these children have the same 2 parents and the same 4 grandparents, the DNA they inherit is distinct. Some information shows up in every grandchild, such as the A and the G. But other pieces are nowhere to be found. The N, S, and W from Andrew and Sandra, and the H, M, and I from Graham and Elaine were not inherited by any of their grandchildren. Of course, now, great visual example, but actual DNA is much more complex than this example. But here we're just looking at 6-letter names, while the DNA we look at to make up your genetic name has hundreds of thousands of, quote, letters. Testing lots of people in your family can be super helpful. Your father's results might show an ethnicity, yours didn't. Your sister's results might connect you to even more cousins. And by looking at your DNA results alongside your family's, you can achieve a more complete view of your genetic history. So now that you understand a little bit more of how genetic inheritance works and you've taken your AncestryDNA test, you'll receive that long-awaited email saying that your results are in. You can click on the link in your email and it will take you to your Ancestry account and you log into your account. Then we will walk you through about what you are about to discover. Your results will include an ethnicity breakdown, a DNA story, and some DNA matches. Your ethnicity estimate may include 2 sorts of results. The solid dot results indicate origins from about 1,000 years ago, from up to 1,000 years ago. That's a long time. That's a long DNA history. So that's the solid dot. And the dotted dot results are additional communities that indicate a more recent origin, roughly 50 to 70 to 300 years ago. So that's kind of the difference between the solid dot and the dotted dot. These are my AncestryDNA results, and looks like I have a strong Western European heritage with a bit of Quebecois in there. So my DNA story includes more information about that French-Canadian ancestry. This includes an amazing timeline that you can see about the region, beginning in about 1700, details of migration patterns, geography, historical events, and life in the region. Finally, my DNA matches will give me a listing of other people who have taken an AncestryDNA test with whom I share DNA. For instance, 18, according to this, 18 of my AncestryDNA matches also share the Quebec French settlers community. So there are apparently over more than 500,000 people in the AncestryDNA network that are in that community, and 18 of them share DNA with me. So after a brief overview, I am ready. I'm ready to explore those results. So before sharing the results of the green tab on the top, I'm going to take a deeper dive into what my AncestryDNA has to share with me. So I click View DNA Story. My ethnicity estimate will then show up first. So as I was told in the overview, this is what I'll see first, and highlights regions of the world that are included in my DNA. I have a majority percentage in this DNA with England and Northwestern Europe, and that wasn't too surprising to me since I know my family tree pretty well. The Norway percentage, however, was very interesting, and I was excited to discover that little bit of percentage, and it falls right in line with the history of the regions included in my AncestryDNA, that I would have Norway in there. Along with my Quebec settlers that I had previously mentioned, I had North Alabama settlers, Southern state settlers, and West North Carolina settlers. So these regions clearly line up with my mom's side of the family in Quebec and my dad's side of the family, which is all things Southern. So digging into the details of my DNA story, I learned that many of the French immigrants came to that region of Quebec early on in the early 1700s, and that shows in this DNA story. And that's part of the region of Quebec that my AncestryDNA is connected to. So the timeline feature is fascinating and helpful when you're trying to make a timeline of your own family's story. So once the tree is linked and you've looked at everything and you've looked at your AncestryDNA story, the next area to explore is DNA matches. So it's time to find some of those long lost cousins. So we go back to the AncestryDNA homepage, which looks like this, and we click on View All DNA Matches. Here's an example of what a match list may look like. So if a parent has taken an AncestryDNA test and they are genetically related to you, their results should show up in your match list. So notice in this particular instance, we have a listing of a parent-child up at the top. So AncestryDNA doesn't know which relationship it is because they're not looking at age data, but rather how much data they share or how much DNA they share. So the result is that either it's the parent or the child. In this case, a parent and child share the same amount of DNA. So if you know that that's your parent, then there it is. So remember, you share 50% from your parent, each parent. It's roughly about 3,500 centimorgans, or that little cm next to it. So that's a super technical term, which is just a measurement term. It's like inches or feet or Celsius or Fahrenheit, whatever, just a term that helps you understand how much DNA you share with another match. But you'll learn more about that and how to utilize that math information in a different class. But it's interesting to note, because that is how Ancestry determines the relationship of your match, is by how much DNA you share with another match on Ancestry. For example, the next category listed is full sibling. The amount of DNA shared here indicates that the only relationship possible is that of a full sister or a full sister or brother, in this case, a sister. Another grouping that AncestryDNA offers is close family. So the ranges here vary from close family, which could be a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, to a first cousin or first cousin once removed. And as the list goes on, it sorts again by how much DNA you share with a match, from the highest amounts at the top of your list down to the lowest amounts, which include the final category of distant cousin. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, there are two bits of information that come in handy when looking at your match list and understanding just who all of these relatives are. If a match has a family tree that is attached to their DNA, just like we told you to do, then it will be listed as linked tree. So remember, when I told you to attach those results, this is why, because it will give that little linked tree icon. And if they have a family tree on their account, but it is not linked to the results, then it will read unlinked tree. So why do we want the trees linked? So Ancestry can help do some of the work for you in discovering how you are related to your match. So by looking at both your tree and your match's tree and trying to determine a possible common ancestor. So it can only do that. The tool can only work to its maximum performance if you have linked your tree to your AncestryDNA results, thus getting this little common ancestor, little green leaf, which is fantastic. Sometimes there is a tree that is attached, but it's a private tree and it will show a lock. So this means you just need to contact the match and ask them to grant you permission to see their Ancestry family tree. Finally, my least favorite, no family tree. This means your match simply took the test and no other family tree information is available to connect you to that person. That's a bummer. That means you sometimes have to contact them outside or through the Ancestry messaging system, but outside the match list, and say, hey, let's figure this out together. And sometimes they'll respond and sometimes they won't. But hey, you can reach out either way. So anytime you want to possibly learn more about a particular match or contact them, which I spoke of, you simply click the View Match button on the far right. Here's an example of a profile page. This is a view of my own page, but many profile pages are similar. So you are in control of how much information you want to share to your matches, including photos, tree information, personal information, etc. So my personal tree and my husband's family's tree are both public, and I do have a few private trees that I'm working on that are for other projects. But my profile lists my location, however detailed I choose for it to be, how long I've been an Ancestry customer, and this was since before it was called Ancestry, and some of my ethnicity estimate information and some of my other DNA matches. So this is where someone would message you through Ancestry's messaging system. Another option on your match list is to view your matches via the map function. I love this feature, it's so cool. This will give you a location pin for any of your matches that have determined to publicly list their location on their profile. So you can zoom into each of these pins, then click on them to get the profile to find out more information. So it really gives you a bird's eye view of where your matches are all over the world. There is so much more to explore with Ancestry DNA, and we've only scratched the surface here with matches and maps and ethnicity results and communities, so many things. And we've really only scratched the surface to give you that brief overview today on what you can expect with your Ancestry DNA test and the power of the product. So in summary, first take that Ancestry DNA test. You may want to test your oldest living family member first, just to get that match list even further back with generations. And this will give you more data to discover if you do your oldest family member first. Also, build your online family tree while you wait for those test results to come in, and attach those results to your profile and to your family tree. And explore your ancestry story, which includes your ethnicity estimate, additional communities, and historical information. And finally, view that DNA match page to start connecting to those cousins. So with Ancestry DNA, don't forget, you can connect to your story. You can find those bits of information and discoveries you never thought possible. And remember, there is always a story in every family tree waiting to be discovered. Thanks.